In this analogy, we're going to use a bank. So, let this represent a bank. You've got your nice little double doors here. Maybe in this bank, right, you have a little video camera up here looking at the lobby. And then somewhere in the back of this bank, right, you have a bank vault that ultimately you absolutely want to protect what's in the vault, right? In the digital world, we would call these something like your crown jewels, that maybe the bank has something like a laser tripwire or something. As we talk about aggressing this bank, the moment that you have to suspend disbelief for this to connect meaningfully into the cyber analogy is that the response of the cops would be immediate in this case, right? So the second an alarm is triggered in the bank, that the cops would show up and arrest the intruder, right? And so that would kind of be the equivalent of blocking in our analogy here, right? So let's say our little attacker is trying to get to this vault, right? So the first thing they do is they come up to this door and they just pick the lock. And as soon as they pick the lock and they open the door, alarm goes off, cop shows up and arrests them, right? Okay, so the next attacker comes in, opens the door, right? And they realize that the last guy got arrested the minute he opened the door, and that's when the attacker recognizes that there's a laser tripwire here. So they meaningfully kind of step over the laser tripwire, and now they're standing in the lobby. That's when the camera sees them, the cops show up and arrest them, bang. So the next attacker, right, next time they come back, right, now they pick the door open, they know how to open it, they step over the laser tripwire, as opposed to walking right into the middle of the lobby, they know to kind of sneak along this wall, maybe spray paint the camera, right, do these kind of things, and then they can kind of walk up to the vault. And the analogy here is each time somebody gets arrested in our analogy, they're learning that this is how far I made it and something caught me. In our analogy, now they're standing at the vault. Maybe they put a code in, they spin the vault, the cops show up and arrest them. So they're now trying to figure out how to defeat the vault. Where this all comes back into kind of the cyber analogy is I don't necessarily want to keep the robbers out of the lobby, right? That's certainly not agreeable. We don't want to just allow bank robbers to wander around in our lobby. But ultimately what I'm after is preventing the money in this vault from leaving the bank. That's ultimately what I'm after. And so as opposed to having the cops show up and arrest them, maybe we want to watch them as they attack the vault. Maybe they get out a drill and start drilling into it. Maybe they use, liquid nitrogen or some other capability to defeat the vault. And we want that insight. As defenders, we want to know the techniques and tools that they're going to use to try to defeat our defenses. So as opposed to letting the cops just show up and arrest them, let's just watch them for a minute. Right? Let's see what techniques they're going to use at the next layer of defenses we have. Now, what if nobody's watching? Well, that's a problem. Don't do this if no one's watching. Otherwise, you're introducing way too much risk into your system. But I would argue that if somebody figures out how to get into your vault, that is the most valuable intelligence you will get out of this whole process. So if they get into the vault, what we really want to do is stop them from leaving with the money, right? So if we get into the vault, and then we see them on the camera standing in the lobby with their bags of money, that's when we call the cops and get them out of there. What's most important here is that by letting the attackers do some things, they are basically giving us insight into their tools and their techniques that they're going to use to defeat our security devices. So the analogy here is, why would we do this on the cyber side? Why does this make sense? Because as the attacker is learning their way through the system, not only are they, getting arrested, getting blocked occasionally, but when you're fighting somebody with hands-on keyboard, when you have a block-first attitude, a block-first approach, what you're doing is also tipping your hand as to how you detected them. And that's where the power comes in on the attacker side. Because if they make it through a certain barrier, not only do they have a relative assurance that you haven't blocked them, but they also have a relative assurance that you didn't even detect them. And that is a very, very dangerous situation for a security team to be in, because you want to leave the attackers guessing as to how you caught them, and then take every technique that you learned on how they defeated and harden your system against it.